Every IT person I know of uses the words "the business" like they're talking about God on high, or somebody walking on water. And I'm like, you're talking about like Joe over in accounting who can barely turn on his computer, like he knows what a user story is or understands agile financing. No, no, no. We have to lead. First and foremost, yeah, we get in the way of things because I've always called this if you know Fight Club, there's a movie and in there there's a scene that's always resonated with me. And basically in the scene, there's a business manager asking a consulting organization or product organization whether they can have all the buttons on the interface in cornflower blue because it's his favorite color. And I have seen through 25 years of this, more of those kinds of projects than I care to admit, right? More of those kinds of hubris projects, personality projects. I think this is a good idea. I've got no evidence it's going to do anything, requirements that make no sense, et cetera. As an architect, yeah, hell yeah, I get in the way of those things because we've got important investable decisions to make. And those things, not only do we not get in the way, those are the things that the innovative architect will be driving, right? So again, business is about the decision what not to do. Good business in any context, whether it's technological or not, is about investment decisions. We have limited resources. No matter how large a company we are, there's still a limit to what we're going to spend and invest in. Spending that on the right thing is what we help companies do. What is the right thing? Well, the organizations that the architects I know worked for were the first organizations to adopt continuous delivery and agility and faster speed to market and not bleeding edge, but at least contemporary or cutting edge technologies in places where it caused market differentiation. So again, yeah, I'm all for getting in the way of stuff that doesn't help us compete against compete effectively or serve our citizen or serve our mission in the most effective way possible. And that's what I specialize in. So yeah, the traditional architect, I will say there is a group of old school architects who really think in terms of governance and control, command and control. And that group is slowly dying. And I don't mean necessarily dying, but they've been pushed to the fringes. What we are now is a savvy group of investment advisors. Technology as an investment, technology as a safety mechanism for our customers. Jeff Bezos says, we treat customers like they're a guest at a party. Technology can fundamentally change that, and you know that just from banking alone. Most of our viewers haven't been into a bank forever because banking is done on a phone now, right? That's customer service. That's technology. That is architecture and innovation. And that's the first. So I'm all about deprioritizing the crap and prioritizing the stuff that matters.
I think that's a really good point, Paul, because, going back, 5-10 years, there was this discussion around architects that were order takers versus architects that would sit at the table with the executive as advisors and provide technology input. And I believe, when we start talking innovative technology, it's important to understand how those pieces fit into providing business value. And I see that role of the architect going forward. I mean, that's kind of what we're discussing today is how do we get business value out of this? How do we change our business models to align with technology? How do we select technologies that fit in, right?
Yeah, and look, I have 25 years at studying this field, and I still feel like a neophyte. And it's not so much, I was right before this call, I was just setting up like a Netflix Eureka server in an Azure cloud, just because I was having some fun with it, right? So this isn't about not knowing technology anymore. But I'm just as excited about business models, right? When Osterwalder put the business model canvas out, me and one of my close associates and one of our CITA distinguished architects, Gar Makrusta, who you should definitely interview as well.
Yep.
We're talking about business model innovation the day that book came out, because this is what's exciting. It's the interaction between technology and business models that make the average architect excited. Now, there are lots of us though, right? There are lots of the different types of us too. And it isn't that the one type, overrides the other type. This is about competencies. So what the historically our problem, a problem in IT, and this is not an architect's problem. This is a technologist problem. And this is what I meant by the fact that we haven't yet figured out that we've come out of the back room. We don't approach our competencies in the way that professionals do. Again, the development of specific abstract competencies, as opposed to going to some class on, Java 15 or, .NET or, Microsoft Azure or AWS or Google or whatever your specific area of technical depth knowledge might be, that we're still thinking in the ratchet and technologist, ratchet and sort of what do you call those, tinkerer mindsets, right? If we did medicine that way, you'd have people that knew how to use a scalpel, but not how to take blood pressure, right? And know the relationship between you. People who knew technology and not people who understood the fundamentals of medicine's impact on human health. And so that holistic view and the understanding of the competencies that support it is the only thing that matters in changing the way that IT and the way that businesses deal with digital strategy.
Well, that's a really great point. And, I'm just taking an example from some of our discussions recently when, you start to look at things like integration technology, right? How do I glue these different technologies together? And it's changed. It's really changed from, again, going back 5 years, we were, the integrations were sort of one of very different requirements. And we're moving in really, in that case, into an API microservices world, which helps a lot of other technologies converge. But as it's changing, I think people need to understand that you need the right architecture to make it work. It's not just going to the endpoints, right? It's not just, I'm going to just snip out some code and there I go and automatically get something. For instance, we're going to go in a little bit with IoT, gathering sensory data. You need to understand event-driven architectures versus maybe the retail front online, right? And so there's a whole bunch of differences driven out by quality attributes. And we have to make sense of that. And we have to make sense of that in a way that the executive team can understand, right?
Well, and so there's two things that have to happen in the next 10 years. One is the board of directors has to change. It has to include a technologist on the board, an experienced, deeply capable technical leader. Now, does that mean I'm not talking about a programmer on the board of directors necessarily, but I keep thinking of people that I know that lead truly innovative organizations, people like Angela Yoakum, that is the chief digital officer for Novant Health. Right. Absolutely visionary leader. She's the kind of person that needs to be on a board of directors. Because we need to hire executives that understand how to prioritize and understand the relationship between technology. We're still kicking out or moving out a group of executives that think technology is a back of the house kind of thing, and they don't need it. And so fundamentally, the board structure and executive structure has to change. The other thing that has to change, though, is us, right? We need to begin to professionalize our knowledge bases. I have read 10 Medium and IASA articles, both that give different opinions about the use and or not use of microservices. And you know this well because you teach this in integration, being one of the thought leaders in integration yourself. I've talked to Gregor about these things. I've talked to other thought leaders about these things, but I've read 10 articles, 10 for using microservices for everything, and 10 that say, yeah, okay, there's some use cases for microservices, but they're horribly complex. They're very difficult to monitor. They add multiple layers to development, test, integration, as well as production, and all to only maximize a couple of quality attributes. They don't help you with usability. If you have a customer usability problem, microservices aren't the solution, right? So again, this sharing of best practice, this understanding of techniques before we think of them as the way to do it. So for 5 years, we've heard microservices is the only way to build systems because that's the way Netflix does it. That is our failure. That is where we need to grow up, right? The reason why the COVID vaccine has taken a while and is rolling out at a certain pace is because we don't stick things in people's arms that are going to kill them, or we try not to, right? We have A/B testing, we have blind studies. Medicine has figured out that just because something's new doesn't mean it's good for people. And that is something that we've got to get. This addiction to the hype curve is something that IT and technologists in general have to get over. And that doesn't mean that we should be less innovative. It makes us more innovative because it means that when we're adopting something, we're putting something into practice we know is going to benefit that customer. We know is going to drive a simpler, reusable architecture at the core of our integration strategy within our organization or within our supply chain or within our ecosystem, right? Not just because it's a good idea or not just because it's fun to program.
Yep. I like what you're saying about microservices, but at the same time, there's something I do want to point out there that's very interesting. As you start to get finer grained ways of doing integrations, right, and managing them, and not that we have all the problems sort of solved yet, along with that comes a different way of looking at the problem. I can release functionality in a finer grained way. I can release it, I could talk more about agile development from a business sense. And as you start to connect and converge with different technologies, I think we're going to see a lot of changes, the adoption of microservices. But to your point, it's also important to understand the limitations of those technologies, right? And I just want to do a quick overview of the landscape today as we're talking. I think there's some technologies that I want to cover that are really going to be more impactful that we know about. Like when you talk about innovation, probably the most interesting technology is the one we don't talk about today. It's the one we haven't envisioned that's going to come up tomorrow. But there's a whole bunch out there right now, and they're coming together. Like I'm very intrigued. You start to look at something like 5G and how latency starts to go down to connect networks, gather sensory data, pull in Internet of Things with that. Start to talk about control situations that maybe leverage artificial intelligence and augmented reality. So it's not just one innovation; it's this whole, ensemble of innovations. We're talking about things like distributed ledgers, blockchains, augmented reality, and of course, one of the things I think is sort of this dark horse that's going to come up really quick is quantum computing, right? So when you look at all this stuff, I mean, people are, I think IoT is like more on the front lines, right? How is architecture changing to handle some of these things like 5G? Do we have the right principles, or do we have to redesign them? What's going to happen with 5G? Are we qualified to bring it in as architects?
5G, well, we said the same thing with 4G. What 4G has given us is effectively a lot more data to deal with of different types. Which is effectively what you're talking about in IoT. Now, I want us to think about IoT not though as sensors, but as actors as well. So again, we're attaching the thing that makes me the most excited about 5G is effectively device independence, that our digital identities will emerge. As well as our effectively digital avatars, right? So I don't think of sensory data only. I also think of actions and things that act on my behalf.
Yes.
Right. Now, 4G has given us plenty of connectivity. I don't really wish. I mean, look at our. You know, you're in Canada and I'm in Amsterdam, and we're having a lovely conversation.
Yeah.
And mostly speaking, you know, there's no latency, and you know, I see you clearly. I mean, give me an augmented reality experience, and that's something fundamentally new. Speed this up. I don't know that that really fundamentally changes the nature of our conversation. What it does allow us to do is feed additional information from multiple environmental factors into that metadata wise, you know, sensory wise, you know, in other kinds of facets. But the speed alone gives us new or more types of data.
That's a great point. I think with 5G, I just want to, you know, there's really, I think two of the three protocols that are being implemented really deal with this idea. I think, first of all, with sensory data, low power type devices that are going to be ubiquitous and everywhere. And the other part of that is low latency, and that changes the game dramatically. Now we're starting to enable like control systems, not just gathering data and having something remote, but actually maybe using AI in a control system interactively now.
Sure. Well, I mean, you know, the fundamental, I guess, use case or business case of 5G is the self-driving car, right? Which is something like I don't know, I think one of the Wired articles I read said it would have something like 8 terabytes of data to process at any for any mile. I want to say it was mile. Don't quote me on that, or don't repeat me or whatever, or at least don't blame me because I don't remember what
it's too late. It's too late. We've recorded you, Paul.
It was a very small segment of self-driving, right?
Yeah.
That to create something like 4 to 8 terabytes of data or deal with and interact with. So low latency and high data volume abilities allow us to do things like that don't fix connectivity problems, though. Power outages, you know, I mean, we're in an era of digital everything, and I'm from Texas, and I got a whole bunch of Texans that are freezing or were. So we have to also, so we've got a lot to think about as we depend on things like that for health and human safety. We also have to consider whether or not these are good ideas. Yes. You know, I don't want the local, you know, I walk by, across from my house in Amsterdam, there is a coffee shop. There are a whole bunch of people I see, you know, I look out my window and I'm drinking my coffee in the morning.
Yep.
And I see a whole bunch of people going in there. I don't want the system to know. You know, they definitely don't want the system to know when they buy their weed, right? I mean, let's get real. I don't want myself recorded and all of that telemetry about my life necessarily to exist all the time, right? So the connected stuff, right? Do we want self-driving cars? Do we really, really want them?
Yes.
Why? What happens so in self-driving car scenario, right? When one person is drunk, that's one fatality, or worse, if they do something really bad, it's more. When a software bug in a self-driving car software system goes bad or gets hacked, it's 500,000 cars.
So, Paul, this is a great point, and it takes us right into artificial intelligence, I think.
Yeah.
So the first part, I see a few parts to this. The first part is the failure mode. Technologies are going to fail. We want them to fail gracefully. Like if those cars go down, I want them to stop driving, not all of a sudden go crazy and start hitting each other like, you know, bumper cars, right? So failure mode is really big. And then the other thing that you touched on there, and again, this hits artificial intelligence, gathering information. And I think it's the biggest criticism right now of a lot of the social platforms is what about data privacy? And we're seeing discussions around that. So, you know, a lot of information to do AI is required. So we have unprecedented volumes of data coming into our AI systems. But at the same time, we have unprecedented volumes of data that can be used to manipulate people, control them, maybe in unintended ways, right?
And I don't want to, so I mean, this is a talk on innovation, and I absolutely, utterly, 100% believe in innovation. Technology can save the planet in so many ways, right? Everything from better healthcare, to better, cheaper healthcare, all the way to, decreasing poverty.
Right.
So I'm all about it, right? But there's a difference between and we teach this when we teach the ethics portion of our class, which, is something that I'm deeply passionate about, which is there's a difference between what you have the right to do and what's right to do.
Yes.
Right. And that is becoming a public debate, and I always talk about it's like you're saying. So there's a lot of organizations right now working on effectively self-describing AI. Because, AI at the edges, AI control systems, AI HR systems. There was a wonderful article recently about basically AI interview tools in HR processes. Yep. Lots of people applying for a job, and they give you basically what they do is send you a link to apply for the job. But it's no longer just a resume that somebody reads. It's you submit your resume, then you do this little thing online, and a system an AI system decides to forward on your resume or not.
Yes.
Actually, again, I'm not into doomsday scenarios. I honestly believe that any system that humans invent will mimic both human, and we see this. It's kind of, I think it was a Heinlein quote, actually, if anybody's a sci-fi fan. It basically says that any human system or any system created by humans will mimic humans' failures as well as humans, the pros and our cons, basically. Yep. Right? It's kind of Conway's law, but for AI, I guess. What I thought was great. What I think is going to happen is I think we're going to innovate ourselves into a few more plane crashes before governments are going to go, okay, we're going to create classes of systems, and those systems are going to have specialized people work on them, right? People that have had 15 years of study or 20, they've passed rigorous examinations. They're basically structural engineers, right? Or medical doctors or accountants or lawyers. I mean, humanity has solved this problem so many times. And yet in IT, we just reject it. We just kind of go like, no, we want to hire the cheapest people possible that know JavaScript and let's get it done. That's just going to go away, right? I mean, how many more software systems have to impact the flight path of an airplane before we go, maybe we should be building stuff differently. And I just think that's coming. So whether it's a year or 10 years or whatnot, it's happening. The second thing, though, is we've got to fundamentally look at how we test new ideas, right? Yes. So that we can get innovation to market as fast as possible, but not we don't want to hamper innovation, but we don't want to endanger people either. And we'd also like to find out whether or not it's a kind of a good idea at all.
Yes.
And then our different societies are going to handle it differently. Obviously, in the U.S., we kind of have a deep belief many people in the U.S. have a deep belief in unrestrained capitalism, meaning, we get self-driving trucks and all the truck drivers are out of jobs, and then that's just the way the world works, and then they get trained, and some of them, and that's a sort of vicious version of capitalism. Obviously, here in Europe, it's a little different, right? There's a belief in a kind of protective quality to it, et cetera. In Asia, there's fundamentally different beliefs, so much more government controlled activity. So we're going to handle innovation differently in different cultures as well. All of that still resides on the shoulders of a group of people that know what they're talking about.
So that's interesting. Innovation in different cultures. Really, can we really do that with a globally, a world converging? Or at some point, do we need to have some standards, even with the architects? Do we need to have some international standard that, because really a system in India versus Canada, I'd be hard pressed to see the difference. Like bad code is going to kill people either way, right?
Yeah, but they'll deal with it differently in both countries, and you can't litigate. There's no global court that will affect that currently. There's no way to litigate or legislate globally. And so it doesn't really matter if we think we want it. These things are culturally based. What is terrifying to an American may be absolutely a welcome and wonderful thing to someone in Asia, right? So there was much to do made about the sort of social monitoring system that was rolled out in China, right? Yep. And I have friends friends in all over the world, some of which have said, yeah, but that makes me feel safe. And some of which have said, that makes me feel like I'm, like the government is literally, invading my privacy.
Yep.
That is a huge debate, and it's going to be a cultural one, right? And it's going to be decided by governmental factors that can't be controlled. Now you'll see we see the rise of and power of a company like Amazon or a company like Google, or historically, powerful rises come with powerful falls and powerful clashes. And ultimately, those things will be determined in fundamentally difficult ways, right? Governments are not going to allow corporations to decide, in the end, populaces and governments are not going to allow corporations to decide their privacy levels for them. The culture is going to decide it, and then they're going to elect officials, or in whatever method officials are chosen, will decide what that company is allowed to do. So I think we're going to start seeing relationships with these mega corporations and technology corporations start to be challenged. And once they're challenged, I always say, look at it this way. The per transaction profit for a Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Oracle cloud provider is relatively low. If the EU, for example, or the United States requires that data stay not just in the region, but in the city or near the city in which the person resides, even at the country level, the profitability of hosting a European cloud, much less a global one, goes to null, because you've got to have 60 data centers instead of 4. So it takes one law, and all of a sudden the cloud innovation strategy starts looking really, really deregulated. Basically the same thing that happened in the early, the 1900s related to telecom and providers, right? And basically you end up with a whole bunch of little tiny cloud providers then, because so any kind of this regulatory versus innovation thing is just getting started for us. And my worry is, technologists are not geared up for this fight. We've never even thought about this kind of stuff. Like I'm dealing with students that they're all busy learning like Node.js and microservices, and they have zero idea of the impact of business, requirements, the regulatory environments, et cetera. And they're all interrelated. So again, we're entering the fray of a much bigger debate that finance entered just 50, 60 years ago. Medicine's been involved with for decades, hundreds of years. We're now in the business of impacting lives, and most technologists have just not even realized it yet. They just kind of, I'm going to code away.
Well, what's really interesting is that you've got new technologies now too that are going to change that business trust relationship. For instance, blockchain, distributed ledger. They enable whole new ways of interacting. So there's going to be a question, do we even want to interact that way? And on the flip side, do I want to have the single authoritarian platform owner anymore? Am I willing to live with that? Or am I going to start to move? Am I going to mandate more appropriate data rules, sharing, decentralized kinds of computing?
Wow, I mean, goodness gracious, I mean, what a well-timed discussion about cryptocurrencies with everything going on with Tesla, right?
Yes.
I've got my own theories on why that's going on, but it is a strange bet, to be sure.
Cryptocurrencies are really interesting. We've talked about this before, because they really amount to equating energy spending. It takes energy to solve these puzzles that support cryptocurrency based.
Yeah, an interesting idea. Yeah.
And so we're using more energy, and this is again, it's transforming the world with different problems, right?
Well, and we were talking about the notion of scarcity as well, and its impact on, just on the human mind. But ultimately, all of our financial systems now are based on Las Vegas, right? They're all based on gambles, right? They're all based on futures and what we think is going to happen. So a whole group of people think that the purchase of that large a purchase of Bitcoin by Tesla was not necessarily the greatest idea ever. So you see a sell-off of both Bitcoin and a fall in Tesla stock. That's a really weird relationship when you think about it, right? That's sort of like saying, well, I mean, we traditionally we had the gold standard, but again, all financial currency values used to be based on something that seemed to have at least long-term intrinsic value. When something goes from 52,000 a coin to 40,000 or something, or was it the flip 50,000 and 42,000? In the space of a few days. And I mean, people lost millions just in the space of a few days, and then they get it back the next day. It just becomes madness. Now, blockchain itself has I've been amazed at the application of it, right? In education, healthcare, the possible applications for patient records and for identity and for anything. Literally, I mean, we're looking at blockchain related to someone's experience, right? So trailing a professional's experiential activities, so that you can say, so for a great example of this is in medicine, is you're not allowed to do an unassisted new type of surgery, right?
Right.
So I've never done let's just call it a heart transplant. Okay. I'm not allowed to go try that out. I have to be with somebody who's done that. So we can think about sort of general ledger as, applications in super interesting ways that have nothing to do with cryptocurrencies. And those are the ones I think that I get the most excited about, because mostly blockchain gets talked about in terms of the currencies. But I think that the other applications are where we'll see real innovation.
I completely agree. Like we did, I think, a discussion about Recycle Go, using it in the recycling context to ensure, in the chain of custody, that you're actually meeting those needs. Nothing to do with cryptocurrency, right? It's an enterprise app, and there's a lot of those going forward. Let me put something out here. This is, I think, one of the interesting things about innovation is the pace of innovation. The pace of radical innovation, a lot of people would argue, is accelerating. You got, Ray Kurzweil with his, law of accelerating returns. Really, a lot of these things came from Moore's law, which a lot of people periodically, Moore's law is dead, Moore's law lives. I was interested in, quantum computing. I saw a great discussion on it, and the person talking said, yeah, that's great, but Moore's law won't apply to quantum computing. Okay, then I heard about Nevin's law, which is like, no, it won't apply. We're blowing it out the window, with exponential increases. I don't see any end in sight to the pace of innovation, and that to me has a couple of huge implications. It means that color TV that I bought, a year ago is worth half as much in a year than it was a year ago, pretty much, right? So value starts to go down. So a few thoughts, crazy thoughts. Are we going to see an economy tied to innovation rate?
So no, I think we're going to see an economy. So the true economy has always been tied to work, right? It's always been tied to effectively the amount of labor that you can get out of a serf. I mean, it started a long time ago,
Yep.
and it still applies to you and me, right? It is the whole economy is based off of a unit of work. Honestly, if innovation follows an exponential curve, they will hit a point where the economy will be based off of a unit of creativity.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That's it. I mean, it will be who has an idea. That is, and in fact, we see the technical economy in fact following my prediction in that, right? And that is, I was recently sitting with a very, very influential chief architect. And he said, Paul, there are 1,000 distinguished superstar architects in the world. And he just picked that number. It wasn't that was the number. We know who they are. They are rock stars. They know everything. There will be a few people that they pick to follow in their shoes, but otherwise, that's it. That's the set number. And all the companies in the world are offering them as much money as possible to trade back and forth. And they just hop back and forth between whoever offers them the most and they have whatever projects they want to work on. And I thought that's hilarious. But the idea there that we're following effectively that the economy is following a unit of creativity and intellect is becoming where the difference between the sort of rich and poor are. Right now, there's always been that. The rich utilized a unit of work before, but what they need now, and what everyone needs now, is the unit of creativity. Right. So you're not looking for the strongest, bulkiest field hand anymore, right? You're looking for the smartest, most capable, most adaptable, most innovative individuals to lead your strategy. And that unit is more important. And then we're going to see a whole class of people that are just sort of taken care of. Like, there was, again, I'm a huge Heinlein fan, and he had a short story about this, right? Where he talked about the fact that effectively work was no longer needed. It didn't work. Like, machines did most stuff. And you lived wherever you lived. There's still actually plenty of space on the earth where people can live. I mean, we talk about the density of population and shortages, but that's primarily due to something that 5G may help us with, which is control systems for things like routing food to places where people need it. The minimum payments or whatever I never can remember, basic wage, whatever it's called, handing people money from the government that they can live on for free so they don't have to do anything. That means that what we're really valuing in society are the people who decide to work hard, who have creative energy, artists, musicians, that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So that's if the pace of innovation continues. Now, that's not what I think is going to happen. I think humans are going to come out with pitchforks and torches and say, you technologists need to slow the hell down.
It's interesting because there's a huge argument, like, let's talk about technology a little bit outside IT. Let's talk about vaccination, for instance, right? It's in the news. Yep. And if you look at the third world country, probably one of the biggest contributors to longevity is vaccination. But it's also reduced the birth rate substantially. There's arguments that go that now that you don't have, your kids are going to live to adulthood, like 9 out of 10 of them aren't going to die. It starts to shift cultural trends. It gives women control over their reproductive cycle that they've never had, for instance, in these countries. So it also changes the culture and slows and actually has a long-term, what's the word, an effect that actually normalizes everything, right? Yeah. And so my fear, I guess, going into this, great points. And my fear is that we actually shun this technology, which could have many really good side effects in terms of normalizing.
Oh, I think we're going to make really stupid decisions for a while. Humanity is not ready for technology. Like we're still at the stage where people think, like their phone is a magic box. Like I've got a number of people that I know of that they just have no clue what they're signing up for. None.
Yep.
I have zero idea. Now, I always relate this to when I was sort of a kid and I got my first credit card, right? I had no idea what I was signing. You remember that big form that would come with your credit card? And it still does, I guess, right? Yeah. And on the back is 3-point type. And I was young then, so I could read 3-point type, but I didn't do it. And even with the one when I did look at it, okay, I mean, it was a reasonably astute younger person, but even then I didn't care because I was getting a credit card, right? We're all about, humanity is going to go through 20 to 50 years of figuring out a balance of how to deal with technology innovation. There are legislators aren't ready for it. I mean, if you watched the interactions between the legislators in our U.S. government and Google and Facebook, and so the questions they ask are like, seriously, that's your concern? Yeah. I also have a problem with the fact that that there is no professional body, there is no independent group of practiced, experienced professionals giving advice, like real advice. Yeah. Doctors in the United States are giving actual, and everywhere, are giving actual advice to legislation about the rollout of, I mean, we just went through a presidential election that was all about, or at least a huge topic was about whether or not the leader would take advice from an actual expert and real professionals, right?
Yes.
On COVID. Where are we on technology and self-driving cars? Yeah, where are we on facial recognition for police officers? Do you really want the cameras on the side of the street to be able to recognize you and give you a ticket because you jaywalked and put that on your record and whatever? God forbid you litter. I mean, at what level of policing do we really want them to know about us? And that's also going to be cultural. Like, we are so far away from understanding technology's impact. We're going to screw it up big time. And like I said, my prediction is there are going to be huge technology riots. Now, whether they're peaceful or harmful, I don't know.
Yep.
But I think the average person is going to wake up one of these days and go, we're being screwed. Our lives are now run by 5 companies.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point. I'm going to sort of, there's a lot of stuff there, and I want to hit, the comments you made about, say, COVID and the experts.
Yeah.
And I find that, so one of the things that you see a lot of is a lot of health experts are coming forward and presenting a lot of advice. What I didn't see a lot of is expertise that balanced a variety of concerns. That, what's the health decision? What's the economic decision? Yeah. What's the lockdown cost? And I'm wondering, I'm going to put this out, is that a role that as architects that we should have been more involved in that decision-making politically?
Oh, good Lord. I would like to see us involved in so many debates. I mean, my greatest desire is to see us put down our internal differences as architects, which is where we spend the vast majority of our time. And it is the single greatest frustration of my role, is to see architects spending time on battles that are internal to our profession, as opposed to really doing some great work. One of my good friends, and just somebody who I respect more than you can imagine, is a guy named Lewis Curtis. And he founded the disaster response group at Microsoft. And this is not that we go out and move rocks and stuff. They actually are a technological disaster response team. They actually install technology that fundamentally helps the recovery from major disasters faster. How do people find lost children? How do you get vaccine out fast enough? How do you separate people? The organizational the things that technology can do in very quick ways, getting connectivity back up, getting businesses running, whatever those things are. And he can tell you a lot more. Great interview, by the way. But I keep bugging him because he's promised to take me out on a mission at one point. But ultimately, this is the kind of thing. Another good friend of mine, Shrikant, it was a chief architect. He's working at Costco. That group in Seattle has founded an architect competition called the SciTAC. And they are actually grooming the next generation of architects in college by giving grants through a competition that I mean, Washington State, Duke has been a part of it. That's the kind of thing we should be doing. We need to be getting involved in public debate. We need to be writing editorial pieces. We need to be talking about what our government is spending money on and who they're getting advice from.
Yes.
Right? I have a deep and profound respect for the vendor community. But they are a little overly powerful in terms of their influence on public opinion and their influence on our perception of technology and their influence on legislation. And I would actually really love it if we would see our engineers working as engineers together to change things. Architects working as architects together to change things, lobbying, focusing on public health issues. The gentleman that I mentioned, Gar, he actually was fundamental in driving the Irish COVID response or COVID tracing app that they rolled out. That's the kind of thing that architects need to be focused on, not the difference between business and enterprise and software architecture. I mean, good Lord, we waste our time on silly arguments when we could be changing the world.
That's actually really interesting. And as architects become more vocal and I think more influential in this broader sphere, what I'm sort of seeing as an importance around as innovation goes forward, ironically, an importance with some of the softer skills. How do I present my arguments with critical thinking, right? And what I'm sort of seeing is this, like with IASA Global, we've set up the set of competencies that an architect needs to have. And some of those competencies have very little to do with any technical subject, really. They're about presenting viewpoints. And I think they're going to become more and more important, Paul.
Oh, yeah. No, there's well, actually, there's just a wonderful article on architecture and governance written by Dan Fain, who is CITA distinguished as well. And it's all about it. He says, look, it's de rigueur. You have to know business. You have to know technology to be an architect. But what people are missing are people skills. And he's got a great acronym there called SIMPLE with 2 E's. And it's just about how to deal with people and effectively now there are a few truly gifted technology strategists out there that get by as chief architects and leaders without the people skills. But quite frankly, the human skills, the management skills, the leadership, right? We call it the servant leader, right? In our course materials and the way we train these concepts, the challenger. But you're also a leader, but you're not trying to be at the head of the pack. You're trying to help change, and change is painful for a lot of people in an emotive way, right? Yep. Some of the biggest challenges we have in adopting innovative techniques, I mean, I still think it's ludicrous that we're still adopting Agile. Like, how many decades is it going to take for us to adopt Agile? Like, seriously, it's not that complex. You change your funding model, you change your team structure, you change your delivery pipeline, and you organize your requirements, stories, epics, etc., in a slightly different way. But man, we're 20 years in, and it's still like, well, what's an agile team makeup supposed to look like? It just.
But part of that, Paul, part of the problem there is the business side of it. Until the business understands the benefits of agile deployment and feature releases in the way that, say, you look at, say, a Microsoft when they start to deploy Windows 10 and every release is rapid, new features, quick pipelines, right?
I'm gonna call bullshit on that. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because our culture has put think about it. How many times do you hear the words the business in an average day? Even now, right? The business is always right. The business knows the business. Bullshit. The business is me. If I'm a consultant, you're paying me to work for you. If I work for you, I'm the business, man. You work for finance. I work for IT. I work for I don't know, operations. I work for the strategy group. Why are you the business and I'm not? I'm the business. IT has an attitude problem. We are still the geeks in high school. And we're still saying, oh, okay, imagine this. Imagine your finance group coming to you. You've got a budget, let's call it a budget of, I at one point had a budget of about 5 million. That was about, there was a discretionary portion of that. And then there was a, kind of a controlled portion of that. My finance liaison never once came to me and said, oh, are you okay with our financing mechanisms? How do you feel about, doing a budget each year? Would you like to, I know you really want that new system. So I guess I'll figure out a way to get you the money. We treat the business like they're walking on water. Half these people can't spell technology. I'm sorry. We need to take ownership and leadership and talk like business people. Now, our learning objective here isn't, I'm not talking about run over your business partner, but have you ever seen marketing and sales talk about who's responsible for that great quarter? I always give this scenario. Yeah, you got a CEO and the leader of sales and the leader of marketing come in, they've had an amazing quarter, right? And the CEO says, wonderful job, Sally, Jane, you just kicked ass. I'm giving I'm flying you to Hawaii. You're both getting massive bonuses. We're doubling your budgets. Rock on. And Sally looks over. Thank you. Karen, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I will happily take the bonus and the trip to Hawaii. But the truth is, marketing didn't have anything to do with the success. It was all sales. What you really should do is give them the budget. And see, you laugh there. And yet we do this every
all the time,
freaking day. And it pisses me off to no end.
It's almost like we have a mindset as architects that we're second-class citizens. And that gets in the way of and we got to go up. All
of IT, not architects, all of IT. Every IT person I know of uses the words the business like they're talking about God on high, or somebody walking on water. And I'm like, you're talking about like Joe over in accounting who can barely turn on his computer. Like he knows what a user story is or understands agile financing. No. We have to lead. Now, I don't mean that we need to get, of course, I speak in a hyperbola and I get very animated. And so I'm not talking about overriding, beating them up.
You bring up a really good point. If you look at some of the richest people in the world right now, like the leaders, where are they from? They're from a technology, they understand it background. Look at Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, all these guys, Mark Zuckerberg, they got it. They weren't just business people pretending, they were technologists that sort of married the two together, and they realized that business and technology weren't separate. That's a great point.
The CEO of the future is just as often going to come from the chief digital officer, or maybe more often, or chief information officer, or chief technology officer. And again, I'm not going to distinguish between that trio, because too many companies have them in, or different structures. Somebody's more operational, somebody's more innovative, somebody's more business focused, whatever. But fundamentally, this whole notion is inherent in IT right now. We think of ourselves as a replaceable service. This is the only group of people I know of that joke about, we joke about sort of, oh, we guarantee, we design systems this way so we can guarantee jobs. But we're the only group I know of that is literally trying to describes themselves as replaceable. Or not, like you said, we really talk like second-class citizens.
Yep.
We train our people in a culture of you're a rock star programmer, but don't ever think about the business, because that's them. They're the business. We train our people like they're wait staff, right? The customer's always right. An internal stakeholder is not a freaking customer. They are a stakeholder. A customer is someone who hands you a credit card or cash or Bitcoin to buy your product, right?
Yep.
If we don't get out of the IT as a service mindset, we're never, ever going to truly achieve digital transformation or digital advantage, as IASA calls it, because we're always going to be sitting in the corner going, please pay attention to us. And leaders don't talk that way.
And that's an awesome point. So to become that leader, when I look at different offerings, I want to be an architect, right? I want to take something to become that leader.
Yep.
Do I need to learn another framework? Do I need to learn a set of skills? What do I need to learn?
So this is the best time. And to me, this is where innovation change. This is how you get innovation adopted, right? You want to talk about the applications of 5G? Well, it depends, because if you're a print manufacturer, 5G is going to do one thing. If you're, I'm sorry, I'm pointing at things in my little home studio. If you're Lumix and or Canon, that's another thing. If you're a lighting company, that's another thing, versus a TV company versus whatever, a table making company. But if you want to learn to be a leader, you have to practice leadership. You have to practice the skills involved in leading, right? You have to present well. You have to, I always say, owners are not born, they're burnt, right? And what I mean by that is you crash and burn so many times.
Yep.
You try things, you experiment, you go out and you approach the world with enthusiasm and empathy, right? You look at what's going on with these people over here in accounting. What are they really experiencing? Oh man, that's terrible. I've got an idea and I'm going to make that idea happen. And that is where leadership comes from. It comes from a sense of practice on a certain set of skills. And really, some of those are about communication. They're about people interaction, right? I need to learn to listen to you. I need to practice this one a lot better. I need to learn to listen to you, right? I need to learn to find out what your problem is, empathize with you. I need to think about you as a person, build trust with you. And building trust doesn't mean being smarter than you. It means letting you in, understanding your pain, right? Then I can be smart and they'll listen to me. So technologists often approach trust in the wrong way, right? A great salesperson will ask about your kids. They'll talk to you about your company. They'll talk to you about your pain, and they'll create trust with you. Then they'll talk about their product. IT people do it the other way. They think, I'm going to be as smart as possible in front of you and show off my big brain.
Right.
And all you do is turn people off that way because they don't trust you. So they don't care about your, So the point is we've got a set of human dynamic skill or competencies and a framework of education that focuses on leadership challenging profiles. How do you think about leadership, and not just in the American sense, because I have a very American style, and I'm very aware of that. Other places, being a leader is more about is the opposite. It's not about standing at the head of the pack. And in fact, I think even in American style, we really need to learn that servant leader quality. But being a leader is about practicing those skills. And I think that we just kind of ignore them. Quite frankly, we just go, you know what? Ooh, AI. And, we forget about leadership and humans and connection and politics and all the stuff that actually goes into making a great innovator.
So that's actually a really a great point. So how do I remember that? Like, do you think curriculum, like when you're part of IASA Global and you start moving towards something like a C2P, do those curriculums help build leaders?
So I'm always the hardest on us. Probably the worst sales guy for ISA in the world because for me it's never enough. Like we've never done enough.
I'm aware. Yep, absolutely.
And I think that ultimately that probably isn't the best thing to have in a CEO, but it is in a way a good thing. But we've done amazing things in terms of our curriculum and whatnot. And there's even, this year we're rolling out even more, right? We've got learning shots, we've got master's curriculum, we've got training. Each one of our courses effectively builds on skills. Our competency model is a set model, but we also recognize that you have different levels in each of those competencies. And so what we try to do is effectively build leaders over time. So we may take somebody from a software developer where they've never had a chance to actually lead a team and start teaching them things about challenging or decision-making. Basically, effectively rigor in how you think about decisions. So that one of the things a great leader does is they say, here's how we considered the options, right? They explain it in a clear and concise fashion. So one of the things that we do is we help people make better decisions based off of multiple options, as opposed to kind of going with gut or team feel. We also then may build on top of that presentation skills, and techniques. All of these things have little fun techniques that you can pull out of books or that we get from thought leaders or that, some of our set of Ds come up with, et cetera. And then we build on those, and then we help mentor. So as you hit the set of P level, which is our professional board level certification, you're starting to get to mentoring and coaching. So I may say, what you need to do is speak a little more often. What I'd like you to do is speak at a couple of conferences or, present, even internally. I'd like you to start hosting a few education sessions during your lunch hour and invite anybody, not because it will just be a good thing for the company, which it is, but because I'd like to see you develop that presence, right? The ability to present effectively, engage an audience emotively, engage an audience intellectually, make them laugh, be able to not stare at your slide. You've seen that person kind of going like, and this is our architecture, and but really stand tall. Yep. And especially, I miss in-person classes so much. I miss them so much because in in-person classes, we really get into these dialogues, right? Where we can challenge somebody and say, okay, I'm going to be the CIO and I just walked in on your meeting now. What are you going to tell me? Give me 3 points. Why is it 3, not 5?
Yep.
And it goes into the science of the way the human mind works and the way we remember things, et cetera. So we really do try to develop architects as leaders, not as managers as much, but as true kind of, I think of leaders as somebody that you follow, whether you get paid to follow them or not.
Yeah, I think that's a really great thing because innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum, Paul. Like that's, no. And you need to work with people. It's the way it's going to be, right?
I will say we should talk about what sustained. I mean, I'm thrilled with things like GitLab and GitHub and some of those kinds of things where effectively we get kind of open source where we've gotten this sort of open innovation quality. I love the open innovation movement. The organizations that are starting to adopt. That's something that we haven't talked about really at all, which is how do I develop an innovation practice?
Well,
that's I think a whole segment in and of itself, because You've got everything from open innovation where you see companies. I mean, I was so impressed with AstraZeneca when they built an open innovation hub where really they basically said, here's a problem we're trying to solve. Anybody in the world can solve it, and we'll reward you for that. And you'll become a part of the winning solution. I think that these kind of creating an innovation culture. Anyone can have an idea. Anyone can win from an idea. I mean, if you think about some of the
it sort of goes outside the corporate boundaries to get more. It's going back to the artisan, the individual. When you were talking about that point of creativity, getting them involved in those platforms.
And we always think of it, I always think of what was that movie about the mathematician? The mathematician. I think it had
A Beautiful Mind.
No. He was just crazy. I liked that one for just because he was nuts, and that was the best. But no, I was thinking about the one where he's kind of a punk kid growing up in Boston, but he's just really smart anyway. And he's like a janitor at Harvard, and so starts solving problems. I always forget things, but either way, we have to think about, so architects, I think we get the science of innovation down, but part of the science of innovation is that great ideas come from everyone.
I think you're right. Great ideas come from everyone. And as even in business model innovation, Osterwalder would bring up this point. It's not just one business model. It's a lot of business models, a lot of ideas, and filtering them, having a lot of people.
And I think we've always been so overwhelmed and so under. I mean, I will admit, IT has been kind of the what do you call it? The unpopular kid on the internal leadership team for a long time, right?
Well, let's face it, we've been a liability, not an asset until recently.
Now, see, we've thought like a liability.
Good point, Paul.
See, this is the whole point that I've been making is, I got my first chief architect title a long time ago because I innovated in a way that other people didn't. We think like a liability. That's why we're a liability. I mean, everyone at the company gets a salary, and we all know that the biggest cost of a company is payroll. Everybody's a liability, unless they're doing something fundamentally to drive wins. You tell me in the last 30 years, any finance department that can run without technology. And I'm not talking yesterday, I'm talking 30 years ago.
Yep.
Right? I don't care if you're talking EDI. It's just, we've always, our mindset has always been, oh, they're the business. So they're awesome and we're not, you cannot approach, you can't be a part of a leadership team if your approach is, oh, when you smart people figure things out, just let me know and I'll get it done. That's like, it just doesn't, humans don't function that way. So we've always thought like a liability. That means that all of the math in IT is done as if it's a liability. What do we try to optimize? Cost, not revenue, cost.
Yep.
So again, I go back to that marketing and sales thing. Both of those people in that meeting with the CEO are going to say, "Nah, sales did all the work," and the marketing person's going to go, "Nah, marketing did all the work." Right? They're fighting for their innovative capacity.
But to your point, Paul, as a consultant going into a company, the big wins are in revenue. The big wins are strategic. They're not in cost optimization, right?
So I once heard a CEO say the smartest thing that I think every IT person it should be the first class. It should be at the beginning of every JavaScript class and everything in it. And that is, saving money is just your job. Making money is what I reward, right? So I want the scenario was effectively, we keep talking about, well, if we just had executive sponsorship. And I heard this wonderful story of a CEO that said, look, everybody in the company would benefit from my sponsorship. Everyone. If I pick a janitor and say, I think he's the most awesome person in the world and super innovative, everybody in the company is going to start listening to that janitor. He asked the question, who do you think I support? Who do you think I give my executive sponsorship to? And I go, and he said, the people that don't need it. The people that are doing that are making miracles happen, the people that are delivering innovation, they get my full-throated support and all the budget they want because I don't have to sponsor them. They're not begging for money like they're nobody. They're out there making big wins. And I realize as an investor, I want to back winners. I want to back people who are already winning. And that is innovation at its core, right? This is what we've been doing now. And this is what I love about the Bezos' examples, et cetera, and the Airbnbs. Yep. Now we've just got to get that thinking inside of banks, inside of insurance companies, oil and gas, and non-technology companies, you know? We are innovators. We are the business. Get it done and go get it done.
And to the point, a non-technology company, I don't think there was going to be such a thing going forward, really.
Well, there hasn't been one for 20 years. Yeah. I'm sorry. The dairy industry is being digitally disrupted. That's milking cows, man. Like we've been like, it is just us. We're the ones that are late to the party going like, oh, and I get it. We're introverts, many of us, right? Yeah. I totally understand. I get the sort of INFJ personality, but still, we're the ones changing the world and have been for years. We're just waking up to that fact, and we need to just that means we need to start acting like it. Now, again, I want to say last time, I am not saying walk into your next meeting and go like, I'm smarter than all of you, so shut up, right? But we have to act like business people now. We are the business, right? We are the business. We've been the business. We just haven't realized it. And once we realize it, everything starts to change.
Awesome.